Welcome to the History and Heritage podcast with me, Liam Blake. Join me as we uncover hidden stories and insights that shaped our world. From mysteries to legacies, join us on this journey through time. There are saints whose names echo across every corner of Ireland. St. Patrick, St. Bridget, and St. Columba, for example. They stand like pillars in the story of Irish faith, their footsteps marked in every county, every classroom, and every stained glass window. But Irish history was not built by giants alone. Alongside them walked a quieter company of scholars, teachers, and founders, whose greatest works were not spectacles, but the sturdy foundations of faith and learning. Among these figures, one name quietly endures: St. Jarlath of Tuam. Known in ancient records as Iarla Machloga, Jarlath was born around the year 445, probably somewhere in Connacht, at a time when Ireland was still emerging from the shadow of tribal conflict and pagan tradition. The faith planted by Patrick had begun to take root, yet it was still fragile in many regions. Missionaries had converted kings, founded churches, and sparked communities of prayer, but it would take patient, sustained effort, and educators like St. Jarlath, to build enduring structures of belief and learning. From his earliest years, Jarlath's life was shaped by the highest teachers of the fledgling Irish Church. He first studied under St. Benin, also known as Beninus, a close companion and successor of St. Patrick. Through this link, Jarlath was directly connected to the missionary movement that had transformed Ireland, learning not merely doctrines, but the lived habits of faith and governance that had guided St. Patrick himself. These early lessons would remain the foundations of his spiritual and educational work. Around the year 495, he travelled west to the monastery of St. Enda on the Aran Islands, then considered one of the most rigorous centres of monastic learning in Ireland. It was no retreat for the faint-hearted. Life there demanded endless silence, fasting, and memorization of scriptures, and the endurance of physical and spiritual discipline. Young men studied and prayed for hours, trained in asceticism, and submitted themselves to the authority of a strict abbot. Among St. Jarlath's fellow students were St. Brendan and St. Ciarán of Clonmacnoise, who would later leave a profound mark on Irish monasticism. Being formed in this crucible placed Jarlath at the intellectual and spiritual heart of early Irish Christianity. Returning to the mainland, he established his first school at Clúnfois, or Clúnfish, near what is now Tuam. This was not a modest local gathering. Clúnfois became a monastic college of renown, drawing students from across Ireland. The school produced men who would become saints themselves, including Coleman of Cloyne, later a bishop and a leading figure in Munster. Through teaching, Jarlath exerted influence far beyond what armies or kings could achieve. In a country still organising itself politically and spiritually, education was a tool of transformation. It was at Clúnfois that a defining event of St. Jarlath's life unfolded. According to tradition, one of his former pupils prophesied that St. Jarlath's life work was not yet complete. He told him to travel with a chariot, for God would reveal the site of his ultimate foundation. The wheel would break where his future monastery should rise. Jarlath, then already an old man, accepted this guidance with humility, saying, "Take me into thy service forever and ever." The story of the chariot is not a tale of magic, but a reflection of obedience and faith. Jarlath listened, not because it was easy, but because it was right. The chariot's wheel broke at a place called Tuam Dá Glúlan, the Mound of the Two Shoulders, marking the site of his new monastery and school. There, Jarlath built what would become the spiritual heart of Western Connacht. The monastery grew quietly but firmly, a seed that blossomed into what is now known as Tuam, first a monastic settlement, then a bishopric, and eventually the centre of the Archdiocese of Tuam. It was the work of patient, faithful construction, rooted in the conviction that building schools, not empires, was the truest measure of influence. St. Jarlath's personal life and character are glimpsed through the early martyrologies and poems. The Failure of Angus records him as a man devoted to spiritual discipline rather than worldly administration. Quimine of Coindera wrote that he performed 300 genuflections every night and 300 every day, fasting, keeping vigil, and giving himself totally to prayer. Contemporary belief held that he possessed prophetic insight, able to foresee the names of his successors. He lived well into his 90s, an extraordinary lifespan for the era, dying around 540. After his death, his veneration became a concrete part of Irish ecclesiastical culture. His feast day, celebrated on June the 6th, commemorates the translation of his relics rather than his passing. These relics were enshrined in Temple na Scrina, the Church of the Shrine, constructed in the 13th century to house his remains. The silver and stone shrine, built 7 centuries after his birth, demonstrates the enduring reverence for his life and work. By the 15th century, ecclesiastical records show that Temple na Scrina was formally connected to the vicarage and prebendary structures of the church, embedding St. Jarlath's legacy into the institutional fabric of Ireland. The symbol of the broken chariot wheel remains central to his memory. It features on Tuam's coat of arms and on the crest of St. Jarlath's College, founded in 1800. The school continues to educate generations, carrying forward the spirit of scholarship that St. Jarlath embodied. His influence extends beyond Ireland, with parishes in his name in Oakland, California, Yarragon, Australia, and Jos, Nigeria. The St. Jarlath's Festival in Tuam keeps his history alive, celebrated not as a relic of the past, but as a living inheritance. St. Jarlath of Tuam was not a man of spectacle. He did not confront kings, convert tribes en masse, or perform dramatic miracles. His greatness was quiet, steady, and enduring. He built a school that built a town, a diocese, and a tradition. He built minds. He built faith. He built Tuam, not by command, not by miracle, not by thunder, but by staying where God placed him and planting something that grew. Some saints are lightning, some are rain. Jarlath, St. Jarlath, was roots. To understand him is to understand the broader story of early Irish Christianity. This was a faith strengthened not only by the awe-inspiring acts of legendary figures, but by those who worked with persistence and patience, who trained teachers and scholars, and who believed that the kingdom of God could be built one soul at a time, one school at a time, one monastery at a time. Every foundation Jarlath laid, every lesson he taught, every life he shaped, contributed to a spiritual architecture that has endured for 15 centuries. In an Ireland of kings and clan wars, of emerging towns and monastic networks, St. Jarlath's work reminds us that lasting change often comes not through spectacle, but through faithfulness. That is why Tuam still bears his imprint, and why schools, parishes and communities across the globe carry forward his name. I'm Liam Blake, and you've been listening to the History and Heritage podcast. If you found this story moving, please share it, leave a review, or reach out to me on Instagram at Liam Blake Podcaster. Ireland remembers its saints, not only for the past they came from, but for the future they set in motion.